The town of Ravenshade doesn't appear on any map. Its streets are cloaked in the silence of forgotten names, its shadows whispering what the living dare not remember. Investigative journalist Elle Graves came here to find her missing brother, lured by his final, frantic warning. Trust no one. But Ravenshade doesn't just hide secrets, it consumes them. Now, trapped in the rotting heart of an abandoned hospital with a cynical detective, a hacker running from his past, and a professor haunted by an urban legend made real, Elle discovers the chilling truth. The disappearances aren't accidents. The hospital isn't empty. And the thing that calls itself Ravenshade, it's alive. Beneath the flickering lights and bleeding walls, a primordial curse feeds on memories, twisting loved ones into hollow echoes of themselves. To survive, Elle and her allies must confront a nightmare that erases more than just lives. It devours who you were. But in Ravenshade, the deeper you dig, the more the dark remembers you, and the hungrier it becomes. What survives when even your name is stolen? Let us begin the story. The journey to Ravenshade had felt like an eternity. As the car wound its way up the winding mountain roads, the sky above was heavy with clouds, a dull gray that seemed to press down on everything below. Ella sat in the front passenger seat, staring out the window at the blur of trees and hills. Her stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Ravenshade was only a few miles ahead, but it felt as though they were driving into a void, a place lost in time and memory. Her brother Nathan had vanished without a trace 6 months ago. A cryptic message from him had been the only clue. Ravenshade holds the answers. Trust no one. That was all. A promise of answers, and a warning. She hadn't known where to begin, but after weeks of dead ends, this town had shown up again and again in her search. Something about it kept drawing her in. Are you sure about this? Victor's voice broke through her thoughts. He had been unusually quiet, but the look on his face suggested something was gnawing at him. Perhaps it was the fact that his own wife, Isabel, had come here months ago and disappeared. She had been investigating the very thing that had taken Nathan, but no one had seen her since. The authorities had stopped searching long ago, but Victor refused to believe she was gone. Elle glanced over at him. He looked older now, his face lined with grief and determination. She could see the shadows of his past chasing him here, just as her own had. I don't know what else to do, she admitted, her voice tight. This is the only lead I have left. Victor nodded, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. If Isabel was here, we'll find something or someone. We can't leave without answers. Behind them, Maya, Ryan, and Jinx sat in silence. Maya, a high school teacher who had recently lost one of her students, Emma, to the town, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Emma had returned, but not as she had been. Her memories had vanished. She was a shell of her former self, and Maya had felt an undeniable pull to find out why. Ryan, a former military man, was more pragmatic. He was here out of necessity, to protect the group if things went south. But even he couldn't ignore the unease that had settled in his gut. The closer they came to Ravenshade, Jinx, with his usual indifference, was glued to his laptop, typing furiously. His fingers barely left the keys as he tried to hack into the town's old network. If there was any trace of Isabel's research or anything unusual about the town, he was determined to find it. The radio crackled to life, but only static filled the air. The signal was weak, as though something were interfering with it. Elle shot a look at the others, but no one seemed to react. It was the first sign that something was off about Ravenshade. They were entering a place that was off the grid, a place forgotten by time itself. They passed a faded sign on the side of the road. Welcome to Ravenshade, it read, the letters barely legible. The town's name felt like a whispered warning, a place that existed on the fringes of the world. Victor took a sharp turn, and as the headlights illuminated the darkened streets of Ravenshade, Elle could see the outlines of abandoned buildings, their windows boarded up, their facades crumbling. It felt like the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The car pulled into a small parking lot in front of a dilapidated house at the edge of town. The structure looked as though it hadn't been lived in for years. It was a 2-story home, its windows dark and hollow, its paint peeling and chipped. "This is it?" Elle whispered. Victor didn't reply. He simply parked the car and cut the engine. The stillness was deafening. The air was thick, charged with an unknown tension, as if the very ground beneath their feet was holding some ancient secret. The door creaked loudly as Elle pushed it open. The smell that hit her was the stale scent of dust and decay, as if the house had been abandoned for decades. Her footfalls echoed in the empty hallway, and she hesitated for a moment, scanning the dimly lit room. The air felt colder inside, heavier somehow, as if the house itself was alive, aware of their presence. Victor stepped in behind her, his hand brushing the wall as he took in the surroundings. His eyes narrowed, scanning every corner. This was where Isabel had come before, her disappearance, the place where her trail had gone cold. "Let's check the living room first," Victor suggested, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something lurking in the shadows. He was never one to trust his surroundings in unfamiliar places, especially not when they felt wrong in every way. Ella nodded and moved cautiously toward the next room, where she could make out the vague outline of furniture hidden under dust sheets. A small coffee table sat in the middle, surrounded by mismatched chairs that looked like they'd seen better. The smell of mildew was unmistakable, and her heart skipped a beat as she stepped into the room. There, in the center of the table, was a pile of scattered papers. "These," Ella whispered, her voice trailing off. They looked like research notes, scribbled sheets of paper, some folded, others hastily torn. As she moved closer, she noticed a few photographs scattered among the papers. Victor's voice came from behind her, a slight tremor in it. "Those are Isabel's." Ella picked one up. It was a photo of Isabel standing with a man she didn't recognize, both smiling warmly, their arms around each other like old friends. But the man's face looked wrong. His features were blurred, as though the photograph had been tampered with. Maya stepped forward, peering over Ella's shoulder. "Who is that?" she asked, a frown deepening on her face. "I don't know," Ella said, but this was Isabel's life's work, her investigation. She knew something. They continued sifting through the papers. There were more photographs, all of various townspeople, faces blurred, eyes vacant. And then there were the notes. Some were typed, some handwritten. Ella's fingers brushed over one of the pages, scanning the familiar words. "The town holds its secrets well. Those who stay too long disappear." The room felt colder still, and the hair on the back of Ella's neck stood up. Her eyes darted to the window, and for a split second she swore she saw a figure standing in the yard. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice tight. Victor turned sharply. "What? Where?" Ella's heart raced as she strained her eyes, but the figure was gone. A trick of the light, maybe, or something worse. Jinx stepped into the room, his face illuminated by the faint glow of his laptop screen. He hadn't been paying attention to the conversation, his mind absorbed in his search for any electronic traces of Isabel's research. "The town's infrastructure is messed up. A lot of files are corrupted, but some are still intact. If you want answers, this is where we need to go." "What kind of files?" Ryan asked, his gaze scanning the door leading to the back of the house. His hand was never far from his gun, ready for anything. Jinx's fingers danced across his keyboard. As he spoke, his eyes flicking between the screen and the others. "Nothing too obvious. Hidden layers, old records. But something interesting keeps popping up. The name Ravenshade appears more times than I can count, and it's in places it shouldn't be. Hospital records, census data, town council documents. The records are all misfiled. They don't add up." Maya's face tightened. "What do you mean they don't add up?" Jinx paused for a moment, then muttered. "It's like they were erased, on purpose." Before anyone could respond, the sound of footsteps came from upstairs, slow, deliberate, the floorboards creaking under the weight of someone, or something, moving above them. Ryan's hand shot to his sidearm, his body instinctively tensing. "Did anyone else hear that?" Victor looked at the others, his expression darkening. "That's no animal, it's too deliberate." Elle's breath caught in her throat. "We need to find out who or what is up there." Jinx closed his laptop with a snap, pushing it into his bag. "Not without a plan. We don't know who or what we're dealing with yet." Ryan didn't wait for a plan. He moved swiftly toward the staircase, his boots muffled on the dust-covered floor. The group followed, the tension palpable in the air. The silence above them seemed to stretch, pulling at their nerves like a taut rope, waiting to snap. As they reached the base of the stairs, the sound of scraping stopped abruptly. A deep, unnatural quiet followed. Victor's eyes flicked to Ella. "Stay behind me." With a reluctant nod, Elle stayed close, her heart pounding. They ascended the staircase one by one, the wood groaning under their weight. Each step felt like a countdown to something terrible, something unknown. When they reached the top, the hallway stretched out before them, dark, claustrophobic, and seemingly endless. The doors to the rooms were all closed, their edges weathered and chipped. The silence was suffocating. Then, as if the house itself were holding its breath, the door at the end of the hall creaked open. The door at the end of the hall stood slightly ajar, its hinges letting out a faint creak as it moved. The darkness beyond the threshold was absolute. The group hesitated, the weight of the unknown pressing against them like an invisible force. Ryan was the first to step forward, his hand tightening around his gun. He glanced back at the others, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay close. If something moves, we fall back. No heroics." Ella swallowed hard, nodding. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, to run, but she forced herself to stay. Nathan had been here. Isabel had been here. If she backed out now, she might never get another chance to find out what had happened. To them, Victor exhaled sharply. "Let's do this." Ryan nudged the door open with the barrel of his gun. The room beyond was pitch black. The musty air was thick, tinged with something faintly metallic, the scent of rust or blood. Maya reached for the light switch on the wall and flipped it. "Nothing. The power's out," she muttered. Jinx, still clutching his laptop bag, pulled out a flashlight and flicked it on. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing a small study. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but most of the books had been pulled down, scattered across the floor in a chaotic mess. A wooden desk sat against the far wall, its drawers open, their contents spilled. Papers, maps, old documents, all of them covered in frantic scribbles. Victor took a step inside and knelt by the desk, picking up a notebook. The pages were filled with handwriting, some legible, some almost carved into the paper with such force that the ink had bled through. Multiple pages. Elle peered over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the words. "They are watching, they never forget. They whisper in the dark." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Maya picked up another paper from the floor, her face pale. "This is Isabel's handwriting." Victor's fingers tightened around the notebook. His wife had been here, in this very room. She had written these words, but where was she now? Jinx turned toward the bookshelf, running his hand along the spines of the books. Some were covered in dust, but others looked as if they had been recently handled. He pulled one free, an old leather-bound journal. He flipped through it, his brow furrowing. "This isn't normal," he muttered. Ryan glanced at him. "What do you mean?" Jinx hesitated, then held up the journal. "The ink on these pages, it's fresh. Someone was writing in this recently." Elle's breath caught. Then someone was here. Before anyone could respond, a whisper drifted through the air, low, faint, just beyond the edge of hearing. Elle's pulse pounded in her ears. "Did you hear that?" Ryan stiffened, his grip on his gun tightening. "Yeah," the whisper came again, this time closer. Then all at once, the air in the room shifted. The papers on the desk rustled, as if caught in an invisible breeze. The books on the shelves trembled. The temperature dropped so suddenly that Elle could see her breath misting in the air. Then, Something slammed against the wall, hard. The sound sent Maya stumbling back with a gasp. Ryan spun around, his gun aimed at nothing but empty space. "Who's there?" he barked. Silence. Elle turned slowly, her heart hammering. Something was in this house with them. Something unseen. Victor clenched his jaw. "We need to get out of here." But before they could move, the whispering returned. This time, overlapping voices, murmuring unintelligible words, building, rising, growing louder. The floor trembled beneath their feet. The room itself seemed to pulse, the shadows in the corners stretching, twisting. Jinx's flashlight flickered, and then the door behind them slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. They were trapped. Would you like me to continue with the next portion of Act 1? Let me know if you'd like any adjustments before we move forward. The door slammed shut with such force that dust cascaded from the ceiling, filling the air like a thick fog. The group tensed, their breath coming in ragged gasps as the walls seemed to close in around them. Elle's pulse pounded in her ears. The whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they were growing, layer upon layer of voices, overlapping in an eerie, unsettling symphony. Ryan took a step forward, his gun steady, but even he couldn't hide the unease flickering across his face. He reached for the doorknob, gripping it tightly and twisted, locked. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. He rattled it again, harder this time, but it didn't budge. It was as if the house itself was refusing to let them leave. Victor turned in slow circles, scanning the dimly lit study. His knuckles were white as he clutched Isabel's notebook. "This isn't just some old house," he murmured. "Something's keeping us here." Jinx knelt by the desk, his flashlight flickering in and out. He cursed under his breath as he smacked it, trying to steady the beam. "This isn't normal electromagnetic interference," he muttered. "Something's messing with the energy in this place." Maya pressed her back against the nearest wall, her breath shallow. She had spent her life studying the mind, psychology, memory, trauma. But this was something else. "I don't understand," she whispered. "None of this makes sense." Elle took a shaky step toward the center of the room. "It's the experiment," she said. "Isabel's notes, the missing people, the town's history, it's all connected. Something was done here, and whatever it was, it didn't stop when the researchers left." The whispers twisted into something else. A word, a name. Elle. Her blood turned to ice. She whipped around, her eyes scanning the darkness, but there was no one there. Victor's breath hitched. Did you hear that?" Ryan nodded slowly. "Yeah, it said her name." The air grew thicker, heavier. A pressure settled on Ella's chest, making it harder to breathe. The atmosphere in the room was shifting, bending around them. It felt like they were being watched. No, not just watched. Remembered. Ella's hand instinctively went to her pocket, fingers brushing against the crumpled photograph of Nathan. She forced herself to speak, her voice barely more than a whisper. "What do you want?" The moment the words left her lips, the room reacted. The bookshelves trembled. The papers on the desk scattered, swirling into the air like leaves caught in an invisible storm. And then, the desk drawer burst open with a sharp crack. Elle flinched as a single sheet of paper fluttered out and landed at her feet. Silence. The room stilled. The whispers stopped. Jinx's flashlight stabilized, its beam illuminating the paper on the ground. Ella hesitated before crouching to pick it up. The handwriting was rushed, frantic, identical to the notes on the desk. But this message was different, more desperate, more final. "If you are reading this, it means I failed. It means they are still here. You are running out of time. Leave Ravenshade before it remembers you too." The name signed at the bottom sent a shiver down Ella's spine. Nathan Graves. Her brother had written this. He had been here. But where was he now? Elle felt Victor step closer, his breath uneven as he read over her shoulder. His grip on Isabel's Notebook tightened. This was written recently, he murmured. Ryan exhaled sharply, his gun still raised. That means he might still be alive. Jinx looked around the room. Then why isn't he here? The silence that followed was heavier than before, the kind of silence that held an answer no one wanted to hear. Then, a soft sound, not a whisper this time, a heartbeat, faint at first, but growing louder. A rhythmic thump, 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 echoing through the walls, as though the house itself had a pulse. Maya pressed a hand to her chest. Please tell me that's not just me hearing that. Jinx's eyes flicked to his laptop screen. His fingers typed, rapidly, trying to read the digital waves in the air around them. This isn't normal. There's a signal coming from inside the house. It's like a frequency, but I don't know what it's transmitting. Ryan took a step toward the door again, gripping the knob with more force. This time, it turned. The door creaked open on its own. The heartbeat stopped. Silence. The hallway outside was darker than before. The air was thick, humid. It smelled of damp wood and something else. Something faintly metallic. Blood. Elle swallowed hard. We need to find him. Victor nodded. And we need to do it fast. Jinx stuffed his laptop back into his bag. I have. Feeling this place isn't going to let us go that easily. Ryan took point, stepping into the hallway first, gun raised. The others followed, each one bracing for what they might find. The moment they stepped into the hall, the door slammed shut behind them. The sound of a clock ticking filled the air, and somewhere in the darkness, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." The hallway stretched before them, impossibly long. The flickering light bulbs overhead cast elongated shadows on the wooden floor, shifting unnaturally as if something unseen was moving between them. Ryan took the lead, his every step cautious, gun raised. Stay close. We don't split up. Jinx checked his laptop again, his fingers working fast. That signal I picked up, it's still transmitting. It's not static. It's a loop. Someone or something is broadcasting it. Victor turned toward him. Can you trace it? Jinx's brow furrowed, already trying. But it's bouncing off multiple points like it's been deliberately scrambled. Maya's voice was tight. Then whoever set it up didn't want it found. Ella barely registered their words. Her eyes were fixed on something further down the hall. A door. It stood slightly open, light spilling through the crack, illuminating the dust floating in the air. She knew, deep in her gut, that this was where they had to go. As if reading her thoughts, Victor whispered, "That room." Ryan nodded once. We moved together. They approached cautiously, their footsteps muted against the warped wooden floor. The closer they got, the more they noticed the details, scratches on the doorframe, as if someone had clawed at it in desperation. The scent of something burnt lingering in the air. Ella's breathing quickened. Her fingers tightened around Nathan's note in her pocket. Ryan was the first to push open the door. What they saw inside made Elle's stomach drop. The room was small, windowless, lit only by a single overhead bulb that buzzed faintly. Against the far wall was an old hospital gurney, its metal rusted, the mattress torn open as if someone had tried to rip it apart. Thick leather straps dangled from its sides, the buckles stained dark. But it was the walls that sent a fresh wave of dread washing over her. They were covered floor to ceiling in writing, scribbled in ink, scratched deep into the wood, burned into the plaster. Some were names, others were phrases, desperate warnings. I tried to leave. They don't forget. It always comes back. And in the center of the wall, scrawled larger than anything else, Nathan Graves was here. Ella's breath hitched. She rushed forward, running her fingers over the words. The ink was still fresh. Victor, she whispered. He was alive when he wrote this. Victor swallowed hard, his eyes scanning the room like a man desperate for answers. Then where the hell is he now? Maya turned toward the gurney, her gaze falling to the floor. Something gleamed beneath the metal frame. A key. She bent down and picked it up. It was old, its surface corroded, but the number etched onto it was still visible. Out of 3. Jinx peered over her shoulder. That's gotta be a room number. Ryan straightened, already moving. We find that room. Now. As if on cue, the light overhead flickered violently, then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Ella's breath caught. Then, a soft exhale. Not theirs. Something else was in the room with them, a scraping sound. Slow. Deliberate. The noise of nails dragging across wood. Elle's hand flew to her pocket, gripping the note so hard her fingers ached. She didn't dare move. Ryan was the first to break the silence. Move? Now. Maya fumbled for her phone light, but before she could turn it on, the gurney slammed against the wall with a deafening bang. Elle barely had time to react before Victor grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward the door. They stumbled into the hallway just as the bulb inside the room exploded, plunging everything into a deeper darkness. Ryan slammed the door shut behind them, locking it. For a single, suffocating moment, everything was still. Then, the doorknob rattled. Someone or something was trying to get out. Jinx exhaled shakily. We need to get to room 203. Elle forced herself to nod. Before whatever is in there gets out. Without another word, they turned and ran. Their hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway as they moved toward room 203. The air felt heavier with every step, thick with something unseen, pressing against their chests like a warning. The hotel, or whatever this place had been before, seemed endless. The hallways stretched unnaturally, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. No matter how fast they moved, it felt like something was dragging them deeper inside. Jinx was typing furiously on his laptop as he ran. This place is warping. It's, God, I don't know how else to explain it, like a shifting maze. Ryan cursed under his breath. We don't stop moving. Maya clutched the old key tightly in her hand, her breathing sharp and uneven. What if room 203 doesn't exist anymore? Victor shook his head. It has to. His voice was laced with something raw, something desperate. If Nathan left us that clue, then it means he found a way through this place. And if he found a way, Elle completed his thought, then we can too. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they turned a corner, and there it was, a rusted brass plate, barely hanging onto the chipped wooden door. Room 203. The number had been scratched over again and again, as if someone had been trying to erase it. But this was it. Ella hesitated for only a second before grabbing the key from Maya and jamming it into the lock. The door swung open before she could even turn it, as if it had been waiting for them. Inside, room 203, the room was unlike the others. Unlike the decrepit, rotting hallways outside, this space was almost pristine. The bed was made, the furniture looked untouched. A single lamp on the nightstand flickered weakly, casting a dim glow over the walls, and at the center of the room, a desk. Ella's heart clenched as she took in the scene. The desk was covered in papers, open notebooks, scattered maps. An old tape recorder sat on the corner, the tape still inside. Victor was already moving, rifling through the documents. These are Isabel's notes, he murmured, turning a page filled with frantic handwriting. She was here. Jinx picked up a torn sheet of paper and frowned. No. Someone else was too. Elle stepped closer and saw what he was holding. It was a letter, and though the ink was smudged in places, the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Nathan Graves. Her pulse jumped. Read it. Jinx swallowed before beginning. If anyone finds this, it means I failed. I tried to stop it. I thought I could. But Ravenshade isn't just haunted. It's alive. It's feeding on us, on our names, on our memories. And once it remembers you, it doesn't let you leave. I'm running out of time. I can already feel it forgetting me. If I disappear, don't try to find me. Burn this place down. Before it takes you too. Silence filled the room. Elle's hand shook as she reached for the letter, gripping the paper so tightly it nearly tore. He was still alive when he wrote this. Ryan's expression was unreadable. And now? Victor's jaw tightened. We find out. Jinx moved toward the tape recorder, inspecting it. It's old, but it still works. He pressed play. A burst of static filled the room. Then, a voice. Nathan's voice. If you're hearing this, you're already too deep. Ella's breath caught in her throat. I don't know how long I've been here. The days blur together. Time moves differently in this place. It loops, bends. It's like the town is rewriting itself, shifting the past, erasing people one by one. A pause, a shuddering breath. I can hear them whispering. The ones who disappeared, they say my name like they're trying to remind me that I exist. The sound of something moving in the background. A sharp inhale. Then, lower. I think I'm next. The static swallowed his voice, then one final whisper before the tape cut out. Elliot, don't let it take you too. The silence that followed was unbearable. Elle pressed a hand to her mouth. He knew. He knew something was happening to him. Maya looked sick. He said the town was rewriting itself. Jinx swallowed hard. Then we're not just dealing with ghosts. Victor turned toward the door. We need to get out of here, now. Ryan was already moving, but as soon as he reached for the doorknob, the entire room lurched. The walls trembled. The light overhead flickered violently. Then a sound. Not a whisper this time, a deep, low growl. From inside the room. Elle turned slowly, and she saw it. A shape in the corner, barely visible in the flickering light. No eyes, no features. Just a shifting void of darkness stretching unnaturally, spilling toward them like a living shadow. It opened its mouth and spoke. You shouldn't have remembered. The walls collapsed inward. Darkness swallowed them whole. The darkness was suffocating. Elle couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The weight of the void pressed against her chest, thick and cloying, as if the shadows themselves had come alive to smother her. Then, a sudden pull. Like being yanked underwater, she was dragged down, 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 and then, light. Flickering, cold fluorescence overhead. The scent of antiseptic and rust. The distant hum of something mechanical, droning like an old hospital ventilator. Elle gasped, her lungs burning as she inhaled the stale air. She wasn't in room 203 anymore. She was somewhere else, the forgotten ward. The floor beneath her was cracked tile. The walls, peeling white paint, streaked with something dark. Old medical equipment lay abandoned in the corners. IV stands rusted, patient beds overturned. A hospital, but not like any hospital she'd ever seen. Elle. She turned sharply at the voice Victor. He was slumped against the wall, clutching his side, his face pale. Not far from him, Jinx was on his knees, shaking off the disorientation. Ryan was already on his feet, gun raised, scanning the corridor they'd been thrown into. Maya was the last to wake, groaning as she pressed a hand to her head. Where the hell are we? Ella helped Victor to his feet, her pulse still hammering. I don't know. 1 second we were in the hotel and then it happened. Ryan finished grimly. Jinx turned in slow circles, taking in their surroundings. His laptop was gone, his backpack missing. This isn't real, he muttered. It can't. We were in Ravenshade, not wherever the hell this is. Victor's voice was raw. We need to find a way back. Ryan was already checking the corridor. Then we move. Elle took a step forward and froze. A faint sound, soft, inconsistent, a beeping, like a heart monitor. She turned her head toward the far end of the hallway. A single room stood at the end, its door slightly ajar, a pale blue light spilling out. And, inside, a shadow moved. Ella's breath caught in her throat. Nathan? Before she could stop herself, her feet were moving. Elle, wait! Victor called. But she didn't stop. She reached the door, hand trembling as she pushed it open. And what she saw inside nearly sent her to her knees. The patient room, the room was stark. White walls, a single hospital bed at the center, and in it, a man, hooked up to wires, monitors, IV drips. His face was gaunt, his skin pale. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling in slow, rhythmic breaths. Elle's heart stopped. Nathan. Her. Voice cracked. The man didn't move, but the monitor beside him beeped faster. Elle staggered toward the bed, reaching out a shaking hand. Nathan, it's me. It's Elle. I found you. She didn't get to finish, because the moment her fingers brushed his wrist, his eyes shot open. Not normal eyes. Black. Endless. Wrong. And then he screamed. A sound so raw, so inhuman it made the room itself shudder. The monitors burst. The lights overhead exploded, showering glass in every direction. And then, darkness. A voice whispered in Elle's ear. You were never supposed to find him. A force threw her back. She hit the ground hard, the air leaving her lungs. Through the haze of pain, she heard Ryan yelling, Victor shouting her name, and then everything collapsed. The walls peeled away, revealing only an abyss beyond, and in that abyss, countless figures standing, watching, faceless, silent, remembering. A single hand reached for her from the darkness. Nathan's. Elle screamed. Elle's scream echoed into the abyss. But no sound came back. She was falling, plunging into darkness, weightless, the air rushing past her ears. The faceless figures loomed around her, their presence suffocating, stretching into an endless void. Nathan's hand was still outstretched, but the moment her fingers reached for his, he vanished. A voice slithered through the void. Names have power, Ellie, and now we know yours. Then a sharp, violent pull. The world snapped back into focus. Elle gasped, her body jolting awake like she had just surfaced from drowning. She was no longer in the abyss. She was on the ground, back, in the hospital hallway. The others were around her, shaken, their faces pale with fear. Victor was gripping her arm tightly, his expression frantic. Elle, what the hell happened? Her lungs burned as she tried to form words. Nathan, I saw him. He's here, somewhere. Ryan pulled her up quickly. We need to move, now. Maya was already backing away from the patient room, eyes wide. That thing in there, it wasn't Nathan. It couldn't be. Not anymore. Ella's hands clenched into fists. He's still alive, I know it. Jinx was typing furiously on his laptop, his fingers moving faster than ever. Guys, we have a serious problem. We're not just in a hospital. He turned the screen to show a map. We're inside Ravenshade Memorial. Ryan frowned. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Jinx exhaled. This hospital was shut down 40 years ago. Silence. Then, Victor muttered, We're trapped in a place that doesn't exist anymore. A long, slow creak echoed down the hall. They weren't alone, Ryan gritted his teeth. Weapons out, we move. They turned toward the corridor, toward whatever was coming for them, and into the unknown. The hallway stretched ahead of them, impossibly long. The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically, casting shadows that moved in ways they shouldn't. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and decay, like something long dead had been preserved within these walls. Ryan took point, gun raised, eyes scanning the corridor ahead. Stay close. No one gets separated. Victor followed just behind, jaw tight, his grip firm on Ella's wrist. She wasn't sure if he was steadying himself or making sure she didn't disappear. Maya checked the key in her palm again, the one from room 203. If Nathan left us a clue, then this has to mean something. We just need to figure out where it fits in here. Jinx was busy on his laptop, sweat beading on his forehead. Guys, this place doesn't just not exist anymore. It was erased. No online records, no blueprints, like someone wanted to bury it. Ella exhaled sharply. Then we find the truth ourselves. Ryan nodded. We keep moving. They advanced through the corridor, the floor beneath them cold and slick. The hospital was too quiet, not just abandoned, but waiting. And then, a sound, soft, dripping. They turned the corner and stopped dead. The Hall of Names. The walls were covered in writing, not just scribbled words, names, hundreds, thousands, written in ink, in carved scratches, in what looked sickeningly like blood. Some were faded, barely legible. Others were fresh, as if someone had just added them. Ella's breath caught in her throat. At the very end of the hall, standing in front of the newest name, was a figure, not just a shadow, a man. His hospital gown hung loosely on his frame. His back was turned, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to something none of them could hear. Victor's grip on Elle's wrist tightened. Ryan raised his gun. "Sir, turn around, slowly." The man didn't move. Jinx swallowed hard. "That's not a person." The figure finally turned. His face was pale, gaunt. His eyes were black voids, swallowing all light. But Ella still recognized him. Her voice broke. "Nathan." Nathan didn't speak, but something behind his eyes moved, and then, very softly, he smiled. The lights overhead exploded. A deep, gut-wrenching screech filled the corridor, and the shadows lunged. The corridor plunged into darkness. The tay. Screeching noise reverberated through the walls, distorting, not just sound, but space itself. The floor beneath them seemed to stretch, tilting at an unnatural angle. Ella felt Victor pull her backward, his grip vice-like. "Move! Now!" Ryan fired a shot into the shadows, the gunshot splitting the silence. For a second, there was nothing. Then, the bullet never hit anything. The darkness absorbed it, and the figure, Nathan's twisted form, began to move, not walking, not running, but shifting as if reality itself couldn't hold him in one shape. The desperate escape Jinx was already pulling Maya toward the nearest door. "In here!" They rushed inside, slamming the heavy metal door shut behind them. Ryan braced himself against it, his breath ragged. "That wasn't Nathan," Maya whispered, pressing her back against the wall. "It was wearing his face, but it wasn't him." Victor ran a hand through his hair, his voice shaking. "We're trapped in something else's game. It's using our memories, twisting them." Ella's pulse pounded. Nathan had recognized her. That smile, it knew her name. Jinx was furiously typing, his laptop the only glow in the darkness. "I got something. This hospital, it had a special ward before it was shut down." He squinted at the screen. The nameless ward. No official records on what they treated here. Just whispers. Ryan's jaw clenched. Whispers about what? Jinx exhaled, looking up. Patients who forgot who they were. Or worse, people who were never supposed to exist. Maya's voice dropped. "And we're inside it." A deep rattling breath filled the room. Not from any of them, from the ceiling. The watching eyes. Slowly, hesitantly, Elle lifted her gaze upward. Hole had formed in the ceiling tiles, and within that hole, a single unnatural eye stared back. Not human. Not alive. A void, pulsating, shifting, watching them. The eye blinked, and then the walls began to bleed, the crumbling reality. The room lurched, twisting as the very fabric of the hospital warped. The door Ryan was holding burst open, but the eye. Corridor beyond, it was gone. In its place was something else, a spiral staircase descending endlessly into the dark. Jinx swallowed hard. We didn't come from there," Victor exhaled. "But I think we have to go down." Ryan looked between them. "No way in hell. That's exactly what this place wants." Ella's voice was barely above a whisper. "We don't have a choice." The eye above them shifted, narrowing. And then, the walls caved inward, sending them plunging down the spiral staircase, falling, deeper, into Ravenshade's forgotten heart. They fell, for seconds, for minutes, or maybe for eternity. The staircase swallowed them whole, pulling them deeper and deeper until suddenly, impact. Elle hit the ground hard, the breath ripped from her lungs. The others crashed down beside her, groaning in pain. But the moment she looked up, her stomach turned to ice. They were no longer in the hospital. They were in a room full of beds. The ghost ward, a massive ward stretched around them, rows upon rows, of rusted hospital beds, their sheets stained and torn. Some of the beds were occupied, not by people but by shadows, their forms curled beneath the blankets, unmoving. Monitors lined the walls, their screens flickering static, displaying names. That made no sense. Names that seemed to shift and change the longer Elle stared at them. Jinx pulled himself up, staring wide-eyed. This is some kind of patient ward. Maya shivered. Then why are the patients still here? Ryan moved cautiously between the beds, gun raised. His face was tight with tension. They're not moving. They're not breathing. Victor checked. A clipboard hanging from one of the beds. The writing was illegible, as if the ink had been scrambled into nonsense. His voice was low. These people, if they ever existed, they were forgotten. Ella's heart pounded. Forgotten? Jinx swallowed, pulling up shaky research. The nameless ward. They didn't treat patients here, they erased them. Maya's breath hitched. What do you mean? Jinx's voice trembled. They experimented on people, made them disappear, not physically but from memory. They weren't just patients, they were test subjects. A slow, rattling breath echoed through the room. The shadows under the blankets began to move. The awakening one of the beds creaked. The shape beneath the sheets twitched. Elle froze. Ryan whispered, "Don't move." The figure under the blanket shifted, its form contorting as if trying to remember what it was supposed to be. Then, it sat up. The sheet slid away, revealing its featureless face. No eyes. No nose, no mouth, just empty skin stretched over bone. The other beds creaked in unison. More figures sat up. Their heads slowly turned toward the group, listening, sensing them. Then, a monitor flatlined. The figures screamed, a horrible, inhuman wail that shattered the room's silence. And then, they lunged. "The desperate run!" Ryan shouted, shoving Elle forward. The team bolted, sprinting down the endless corridor as the nameless figures poured from the beds, their bodies twisting and jerking unnaturally. Jinx slammed into a door, rattling the handle. "It's locked, shit." Ella's hand trembled as she fumbled for the room 203 key, the only clue Nathan had left them. She shoved it into the lock. The door clicked open. They stumbled through, slamming it behind them. The pounding of hands on the other side was deafening. Then, silence. The team collapsed to the floor, panting. Victor clutched his chest. "What the hell are those things?" Jinx wiped sweat from his face. They were patients, now they're just trapped memories. Elle pressed her hand against the cold floor, her pulse racing. "We need to find Nathan. He's the only one who can tell us the truth." Ryan exhaled sharply. "Then let's keep moving." They had escaped the ghost ward, but Ravenshade wasn't done with them yet. Somewhere in the shadows, something was waiting, watching, remembering. The air inside room 203 was thick, suffocating, not just with dust or mold, but with something else. Memories, Elle felt it the moment she stepped inside. It was like walking into a space that had been frozen in time, a room that had been waiting for them. Jinx flicked his flashlight around. The room was small, with an old hospital bed, a rusted metal table, and a massive mirror on the wall cracked down the center. Maya ran her fingers over the wall. "This place feels different." Ryan checked his ammo clip. "Different how?" Maya hesitated. "Like it's real. Everything else in this hospital feels like a memory, but this room, it's solid." Victor pressed a hand against the mirror. "It's a two-way glass." Ella's pulse quickened. "An observation room." Jinx scanned his laptop. "Wait, this doesn't make sense." Room 203 didn't exist in the hospital's original layout. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "Then what the hell is it?" Jinx hesitated before answering. "It was built later. Hidden." Maya turned. "Hidden for what?" Before Jinx could answer, a speaker crackled to life. A voice, distorted, seeped through the air. "They are watching. They never stopped watching." Everyone froze. Victor whispered, "Who the hell was that?" Ella stepped forward, her gaze locked on the mirror. Then, something moved behind the glass. The reflection. That wasn't Elle's own reflection. Was there. But something was wrong. Her reflection wasn't mirroring her movements, it was staring at her. The others' reflections remained normal, mimicking them perfectly. But Ella's, it tilted its head, watching her. Then, it smiled, a slow, deliberate, knowing smile. Elle's breath hitched. Ryan raised his gun. "What the hell?" The lights flickered. Then her reflection mouthed something. Elle's blood ran cold. "You." Don't belong here. Then, the glass shattered. A wave of blackness exploded from the mirror, consuming everything. The forgotten room. When Ella opened her eyes, she was alone. The hospital was gone. She stood in a different room, smaller, sterile, with only one piece of furniture, a chair in the center. Straps hung from its arms. Rusted with age, the walls were lined with photographs, not of places, of people. Elle's stomach dropped. Nathan was in one of them, strapped to the same chair, his eyes wild, terrified. A handwritten note was pinned beside the photograph. Elle reached for it, her hands shaking. The paper was old, edges curled and yellow. The ink had faded, but she could still make out the words. Final test subject. Procedure, full erasure. Target, Nathan Carter. Ella's pulse pounded. They had erased Nathan. That's why he was trapped here. That's why the hospital wouldn't let them leave. A slow creaking noise filled the air. The chair in the center of the room was moving, turning toward her. Something was sitting in it. A figure bound in the restraints. His head lifted slowly, and then Nathan's blackened eyes locked onto hers. "Ellie," he whispered. And then the room collapsed. End of Part 5 of Act 2. Nathan wasn't just a victim. He was a test subject. The hospital didn't just kill him. It erased him. But somehow he's still here. And he remembers Elle. The question is, can they bring him back? Or is he already too far gone? The world around Elle blurred, the walls of the room warped, twisting in on themselves as if reality had lost its shape entirely. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if the very hospital itself were closing in around them. Nathan was still in the chair, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, his black eyes boring into hers. "Elle," he whispered again, his voice barely a breath. "You shouldn't have come back." Her heart skipped a beat. "Nathan, what did they do to you?" His lips curled into a twisted smile. "They erased me, just like they erased everything else." The room seemed to pulse, a low hum that vibrated. Through her bones, she could almost feel the hospital itself breathing like it was alive, and it wanted them to suffer. "You have to leave," Nathan said, his voice distant, fading. "They'll never let you leave. Once you've entered Ravenshade, you're already part of it." Elle shook her head, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "We can fix this. We can still save you." Nathan's eyes shifted just for a moment to the door. "You're not the first to try." Jinx, Maya, Victor, and Ryan stepped cautiously into the room, their eyes scanning the disorienting landscape. "We need to get out of here," Ryan muttered, his grip tight on his weapon. "We're running out of time." Victor looked at Elle, his face pale. "What's going on, Elle? Who is this?" Elle swallowed hard. "It's Nathan, but he's not the same. Before she could finish, the door slammed shut behind them. The hum in the air grew louder, almost deafening now. The floor beneath their feet rumbled, shaking as if the very foundation of the hospital was about to collapse. Suddenly, the room darkened, as if the lights were being smothered by an invisible hand. A loud, distorted voice echoed through the darkness. "Welcome back, Nathan." The unraveling truth. The voice was cold, almost mechanical, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Elle turned, her heart racing. "What is this? Who's doing this?" Nathan didn't answer. Instead, his head snapped toward the door, his eyes widening in terror. "No, not now," he cried, his voice rising in desperation. "I told you, you need to leave. It's too late for me. But you—" He tried to move, but the restraints held him fast. "You don't understand. It's not just this room. It's everything. They want you to remember. They want you to become part of it." Victor reached for the door, trying the handle. "We need to get out now, or we're all dead." Ryan stepped forward, his face grim. "We can't. The door's locked, and I think we're locked in here for a reason." Suddenly, the lights flickered. Again. Shadows began to crawl along the walls, reaching out like twisted black fingers, their shapes too indistinct to fully comprehend. They were alive in a way that twisted every ounce of Elle's sanity. Maya staggered back, her hand clutching her mouth as she tried to suppress a scream. What the hell is happening? Jinx was frantically typing on his laptop. It's not just the hospital. It's the curse. Ravenshade doesn't let people leave. It erases them. And then it consumes them. Victor turned to him. Consumes them? What does that mean? Jinx's face was pale, his eyes wide. It's not a place. It's alive. A living, breathing thing that feeds off memories, off the souls of the people it traps. Once you're here, you're part of it. Forever. Elle felt a chill crawl up her spine. No, that can't be true. Nathan's voice cracked through the chaos, desperate. It's true. They tried to erase me, but something inside of me remembered. And now it's using me to get to you, to everyone, to make you part of the nameless. Ryan's voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed his fear. We have to get him out of here, we have to. Before he could finish, the shadows on the wall moved. They weren't just creeping now. They were growing, twisting, surging toward them. Elle turned to Nathan. What can we do? He looked at her, his eyes hollow. There's only one way to stop it. One way to break free from Ravenshade. He paused, his gaze flickering toward the center of the room. Destroy the source. The final choice. Elle looked around, the room spinning. The shadows were coming closer, their forms solidifying into twisted humanoid shapes. Nathan's voice was barely a whisper now. Find the heart. The source is below, the heart of Ravenshade. Elle stepped forward. Where is it? Nathan's eyes dimmed. It's not a place you can find. It's a truth you must understand. You can't escape it unless you know what it is. The truth is the key. The shadows lunged. Ryan raised his gun, firing into the dark figures, but the bullets disappeared into nothingness. Jinx yelled, We need to move! We need to… The door busted open and a torrent of blackness flooded the room. Elle stumbled backward, her mind racing. She had no choice but to trust Nathan's words. She didn't have time to question them. We go down. She turned to the others. We go down to the heart of this place. Victor pulled her close, his voice low. You're sure? Elle nodded. It's the only way. And with that, they ran, down the hall, deeper into the heart of Ravenshade Memorial, toward whatever truth lay, buried in its darkest depths. The hospital wasn't just haunted anymore. It was a living thing, a thing that fed on souls, devoured memories, and shaped reality to keep its victims trapped. Elle led the team, each of them moving cautiously through, the corridors, eyes darting in every direction. The lights flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to reach for them, as if the walls themselves wanted to swallow them whole. Every step echoed in the silence, and it felt as if Ravenshade was watching them, waiting for them to make a wrong move. They reached an elevator at the end of the hall, its doors creaking open. Jinx stepped forward, eyes glued to his laptop. According to the original blueprints, the basement was sealed off during the hospital's reconstruction. It's where the heart is, the source of everything, the place where all the memories are stored. Ryan glanced nervously at the elevator. This doesn't feel right. It feels like we're being led straight into a trap. Victor clenched his jaw. It's too late to turn back now. The group piled into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, the hum of the mechanism filled the air, growing louder and more insistent with every passing second. Suddenly the lights inside the elevator flickered, and the air grew thick, stifling. A sharp pain shot through Ella's chest as the walls seemed to close in around her. Then, the elevator stopped. The lights went out. The descent. Elle's breath caught in her throat. She reached for the emergency button, but her hand brushed against something cold, ice-cold metal. A voice, distorted and familiar, whispered from the darkness. You shouldn't have come. Ella spun toward the sound. Who's there? She whispered, but there was no response. The air grew heavier, and the darkness seemed to press in on them. Ryan's voice broke through the silence. We need to get out. This place is alive, and it's playing with us. Jinx frantically typed on his laptop. The elevator's broken, we're stuck. Victor pulled his flashlight from his bag, shining it around the cabin. What's happening? This wasn't part of the plan. The door to the elevator creaked open slowly, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor that stretched out in front of them. It was empty, save for the occasional flicker of the overhead lights. Elle stepped out first, her heart pounding. The others followed, their footsteps echoing in the silence. "Down here," she muttered. "The heart of the hospital is down here. The heart of Ravenshade." They descended deeper into the basement, moving past broken windows and rusted machinery that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The air smelled stale, damp, as if it hadn't been disturbed for years. Finally, they reached a large chamber, the heart of Ravenshade. The walls were lined with filthy tanks, filled with thick black liquid, tubes running from them into the ground. In the center of the room, beneath a darkened skylight, was a stone altar. Around it, mysterious symbols were etched into the floor, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. Ella's blood ran cold. "What is this place?" Nathan's voice echoed in her mind. "This is the heart. This is where it all begins and ends." Jinx scanned the area. "This isn't just an old basement. This is the core of the hospital's experiments. The place where they created and destroyed memories." Ryan moved cautiously toward one of the tanks. "These things, they're not just machines. They're connected to something alive." Suddenly the tanks began to vibrate, and the floor beneath them shuddered. Victor pulled out his gun, aiming it at the tanks. "What the hell is happening?" Jinx stepped closer, his voice trembling. "We've triggered something. It's too late to stop now." The awakening, a loud, grinding noise filled the room, like gears shifting beneath the ground. Then the tanks began to open. Black liquid spilled out, flooding the floor as the lids slammed open. From the liquid, shadows emerged. Figures, mutilated, distorted versions of humans, rose from the tanks, their skin pale and stretched, their faces blank. Ryan raised his weapon, but before he could fire, one of the figures lunged at him, slamming him against the wall. "Get back!" Elle screamed. The others backed away, scrambling to avoid the creatures. The figures were fast, unnaturally so, moving in jerky motions as they reached for them. Victor fired his gun, but the bullets disappeared into the figures, doing nothing to stop their advance. Elle's eyes darted around the room. The shadows, the figures, they were all connected to the heart, to the curse that had been spreading across Ravenshade. The hospital wasn't just erasing memories. It was creating new horrors, new shadows to feed on the souls trapped inside it. "The heart," Nathan's voice whispered through her mind. "Destroy it. Destroy the heart, and the curse dies." Elle grabbed a metal pipe lying near the altar, her fingers numb as she raised it high. "Get away from her." With a single swift motion, she swung the pipe into one of the tanks, shattering it. The moment it cracked, a screeching noise filled the room. The figures froze, their faces contorting in agony. Then, the tanks exploded. The final battle. The blast sent Elle and the others sprawling to the ground. The figures staggered back, their bodies twitching, convulsing as the liquid poured over them, dissolving them. The walls of the chamber began to crack, the floor splintering beneath their feet. The curse was fighting back, trying to hold on. Ryan grabbed Elle's arm, pulling her to her feet. "We need to get out now!" Jinx, his face pale, looked to the altar. "It's not enough, we've only damaged it. The heart is still alive." Victor wiped the sweat from his brow. "Then we finish it." The altar began to glow brighter, the symbols etched into the floor shifting. As if the hospital was fighting to keep its heart alive, the group ran toward it. They would either destroy it or be consumed. The chamber shuddered as the symbols on the floor twisted and turned, glowing brighter with every passing second. The pulse of the hospital, the heartbeat that had kept Ravenshade alive for decades, was growing stronger, more frantic. It was as if the walls themselves were fighting to keep them in. Elle's chest tightened, the weight of what they were, facing almost too much to bear. The darkness that had followed them from the very beginning was now closing in, suffocating them in this forgotten part of the hospital. The figures, the twisted remnants of those who had come before them, were still falling apart, but it was clear the hospital wasn't finished with them yet. Nathan's voice echoed again, haunting and desperate. "Destroy the heart, Elle. Destroy the source, and you can break the curse. But remember, the heart isn't just a thing. It's alive. It feeds. Ella's hands were shaking as she looked around the chamber. The altar before her was alive, pulsing with that same sickly green glow, the symbols now seeming to move, curling and twisting like serpents. She could almost hear it breathing, the heart of Ravenshade trying to hold on, to fight back against their presence. "We need to destroy it. Now!" Jinx shouted, looking frantically between the altar and the mass of twisted shapes that were crawling toward them. His fingers were still flying across the keyboard of his laptop, trying to override whatever system still controlled the cursed hospital. But nothing worked. It was like the hospital was evolving, learning from each attempt to escape. "It's too late," Maya cried, her eyes wide with fear. She was backed against one of the tanks that had spilled open, her breath coming in short gasps. "We can't keep running. We need to end this now." Victor's gunfire echoed through the chamber as he unloaded into the advancing figures, but the bullets vanished before they could even touch them. His face twisted in frustration as he yelled, "This is insane. How do you kill something like this?" Elle turned to him, her eyes locked on the altar. "We destroy the heart itself." She stepped forward, the metal pipe still gripped tightly in her hand. "It's the only way." The final confrontation, Elle moved toward the altar, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear nothing else. The symbols on the floor shifted, the walls growing darker with each passing moment. The hospital wasn't just a building. It was an entity, a force, and now it was fighting for its survival. The twisted figures surrounding them hissed, their forms distorting and shifting into new grotesque shapes. They were feeding, the darkness of the hospital feeding on their fear. "Elle, wait!" Maya screamed, but it was too late. Ella reached the altar, the air around her electric, the weight of everything that had happened crushing her chest. Nathan's voice whispered again, faint and cold. "This is where it all ends. For all of us." Elle turned toward the altar. She could see it now, the source of the curse. A blackened, pulsating core, embedded deep within the stone, its tendrils reaching out like veins into the walls of the room. This wasn't just a curse. It was a living entity, feeding on the souls. It had trapped, twisting them into the very shadows that stalked them now. And as she stared at it, she realized the horrifying truth. The heart wasn't just alive. It was sentient. It knew they were here. It knew they were trying to stop it. With a roar, the ground beneath her shuddered. The heart seemed to pulse, harder, sending waves of nausea and dizziness through her body. She staggered, her vision blurring as the entire room seemed to tilt. It was fighting back. The price of truth. Elle grabbed the metal pipe and swung it with all her strength, slamming it into the center of the heart. The moment the pipe made contact, the room exploded with light. A scream ripped through the air as if the very soul of Ravenshade itself was being torn apart. The ground beneath them ripped open, and a dark abyss yawned wide, pulling everything around it toward its core. The shadows turned into violent whirlpools, dragging everything within reach into the heart's grasp. The altar shuddered violently, its black tendrils lashing out at the team. Elle felt herself being pulled toward the abyss, her feet leaving the ground as the shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, wrapping around her limbs, trying to drag her into the darkness. She screamed, her voice lost in the crushing weight of Ravenshade's power. "Elle!" Ryan shouted, reaching for her, but it was too late. The heart was awakening, and it was angry. The heart of Ravenshade in that moment. Ella realized the truth. The heart of Ravenshade wasn't just a core of memories and souls. It was a prison, a sentient living entity that had devoured countless souls over the years, bending time and space around its influence. It wasn't just alive. It was a force, a curse that had no intention of letting them go. But there was still one thing Elle could feel, a faint pulse, the last remnant of something human that had been consumed by the heart. She understood now. The heart fed on souls, but it remembered them. Nathan had been right. If they wanted to survive, they had to destroy the heart itself. Not just the core, but everything connected to it. The very essence of what had made Ravenshade what it was. The memories, the pain, the souls trapped within. With every ounce of strength she had left, Elle reached for the core once more, her fingers brushing against the stone surface. The shadows twisted around her, threatening to swallow her whole. But she could feel it now. The heart, the source, the true heart of Ravenshade. And she knew exactly what she had to do. The final choice, Elle's heart beat in sync with the pulse of Ravenshade, each thundering beat echoing in her chest. The heart wasn't just a curse. It was a reflection of everything Ravenshade had been. Every broken memory, every lost soul. Destroy it. Nathan's voice screamed in her mind. Destroy it or we're all lost. Ella gathered every ounce of strength, her voice a fierce whisper. I will. With one final desperate strike, Elle slammed the pipe into the heart once more. The world exploded in a storm of darkness and light. The heart has been struck, but the fight is far from over. Ravenshade's curse is more powerful than they could ever imagine, and the final battle is just beginning. What happens now? Have they destroyed the curse? Or will the heart's last remnants drag them all into the abyss? The explosion of light and darkness left Elle staggering. Her breath was ragged, her head spinning. The world around her seemed to warp and twist, a fractured mosaic of reality and nightmare. She could feel the pulse of Ravenshade's heart still pounding in her chest, a rhythm that had become too familiar, like the thud of a drum calling them into battle. But something was wrong. The room was shaking, violently. The walls seemed to be shifting, expanding, contracting. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls groaned under the strain, as though the building itself was breathing, alive and aware of their presence. The heart, now cracked, open, was far from destroyed. Elle's fingers gripped the floor as she tried to steady herself. She could hear the rumbling, the screaming, and the hissing. It was everywhere. The creatures from the tanks were still alive, moving through the shadows, their twisted forms growing stronger with every passing second. They're not finished, Ryan said through gritted teeth, his voice tight with panic. He was standing beside her, staring at the altar where the heart still throbbed ominously. Jinx, still holding his laptop, was typing furiously. It's not just a core, it's a nexus, a link to something older, something ancient. Victor swung his flashlight around the room, his face pale. What do you mean, nexus? What is it? Jinx's voice was strained, his eyes wide with fear. It's not just this building. It's connected to everything. The memories, the lost souls, the very fabric of time, the hospital, the heart. It's part of a network, and we've just touched the thread. Maya grabbed Ella's arm, her voice trembling. Elle, we have to get out of here now. We've done what we could, but it's too powerful. We're not equipped to fight it. But Elle's gaze was fixed on the altar. The pulse of the heart was growing more erratic, faster, more violent. There was something in the air now, something ancient and vile, like the darkness had come alive. No. Ella's voice was low but resolute. We've come too far to back down now. The unleashing Elle pushed herself to her feet, heart pounding, as the room around them began to warp even further. The hospital seemed to be evolving, growing more hostile by the second. The walls breathed, the air thick with a hissing sound as shadows twisted into tangible forms. The creatures were now fully awake and they were hunting. Elle turned back to face the altar. The cracks were widening. The heart, now exposed, was moving, its tendrils writhing, reaching out toward the group like fingers seeking their next victim. The air crackled with electricity, and a deep resonating growl echoed from somewhere beneath them, as if the very ground beneath them was awakening. We have to destroy it, Elle said, barely above a whisper. This place is not just a building. It's a prison. A prison for every soul, every broken memory. Ryan glanced at her, fear etched across his face. But how do we destroy something that isn't just alive? It's part of the hospital. It is the hospital. Jinx stopped typing for a moment, looking up at her with haunted eyes. The heart feeds on fear, on pain, on the souls trapped here. It remembers everyone who ever walked these halls, and it twists them into something horrible. That's why we keep seeing those things. They're not just victims. They're the echoes of everyone who's ever died here. Victor cursed under his breath. So we're dealing with an eternal living curse. The ground suddenly shuddered beneath their feet, and the room tilted violently to the side. The walls were closing in and the ceiling cracked, sending debris raining down. The shadows grew thicker, and the temperature dropped, making each breath feel like inhaling glass. "It's feeding!" Jinx yelled, his voice raw with panic. "We've got to stop it before it consumes us all." The final choice in that moment, Elle realized the truth. They had been playing into the hospital's hands the entire time. The heart wasn't just a singular entity. It was a nexus, a conduit for all the souls that had ever passed through Ravenshade, and the more they fought it, the stronger it became. It didn't just feed on fear. It thrived on their desperation, on their guilt, on their memories. Elle stepped forward, her heart aching with the weight of it all. She could feel the darkness reaching out to her, whispering, calling her name. The hospital wanted her, wanted all of them to become part of its twisted network, to be swallowed by the curse. "No," Elle whispered to herself, shaking her head. "I'm not going to be your next memory." She turned to face the others. "We can't destroy it by fighting it directly. That's exactly what it wants. It feeds on our anger, on our fear." Victor frowned, his brow furrowed. "Then how do we stop it?" Ella's gaze met theirs, a sudden realization hitting her like a ton of bricks. She turned back toward the altar, her breath steadying. "We need to disconnect the heart from everything. We need to sever the link between it and the hospital. The curse can't exist without its connection to the souls trapped inside." Jinx looked at her in disbelief. "And how the hell are we supposed to do that?" Ella reached into her bag and pulled out a ceremonial knife, the blade reflecting the light of the flickering torches around them. It was the key, the last part of the puzzle. She had found it in the hospital's archives, an ancient relic, said to have been used by the original doctors to sever the connection between the heart and the patient's souls. "We sever the heart's connection to the hospital," Ella said, her voice growing stronger. "We cut the ties, literally. The sacrifice." The room began to quake again. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The shadows were closing in, their movements becoming more aggressive, more solid. The creatures were nearly upon them. "We don't have much time," Elle said urgently, moving toward the altar. She gripped the knife tightly, ready to make the final choice. The room exploded with sound as the creatures lunged toward them, but Elle's focus was razor sharp. She turned to face the altar one last time. The pulse of the heart was reaching. A crescendo, a deafening thrum filling the chamber as if the hospital itself were about to devour them all. With one swift motion, Ella plunged the ceremonial knife into the core of the heart. For a moment, everything stopped. The air went still. The walls stopped shaking. The creatures froze in place. It was as if the entire hospital held its breath. The heart is severed, but the hospital is not done yet. Will the curse finally be broken, or have they only triggered something worse? The tension is palpable as the group braces for the final reckoning. The moment Ella's knife made contact with the heart, everything fell silent. The pulse of the heart, which had throbbed relentlessly since the moment they entered Ravenshade, stopped. The shaking of the walls ceased, and the oppressive weight in the air vanished like a massive storm cloud lifting from the sky. For one brief, fleeting moment, it felt like they were safe, like the curse was finally broken, but the silence was too absolute, too unnatural. Elle pulled the blade from the heart, her fingers trembling with the sudden absence of its malevolent thrum. The ground beneath her shifted, like an earthquake that had just begun to rumble beneath their feet. She backed away, her heart racing with a sense of foreboding she couldn't shake. Ryan was the first to speak, his voice uncertain. Did it work? Is it over?" "No," Jinx whispered, his eyes wide, scanning the altar in disbelief. "It can't be. The heart isn't dead, it's just changed." He took a hesitant step forward, his fingers hovering over his laptop keys, but the screen flickered violently. "The system's corrupted. Completely. I can't access anything." "Victory." stood nearby, his gun still drawn, his body taut with tension. Something's wrong. This doesn't feel like a win. Elle's chest tightened as she looked around. The shadows weren't gone. In fact, they had grown, expanding from the cracks in the floor like tendrils of black smoke. They surged toward the altar, gathering in a dense, swirling cloud that took shape, something massive looming over them, formless but powerful. Then the air shuddered again. The awakening roar of sound split the silence, a terrible, distorted scream that made the hospital shake. It wasn't human, nor was it something they had ever heard before. It felt as though the very walls of Ravenshade were screaming in agony, as if the hospital itself had become a living, suffering entity, and it was now fully aware of them. No, Elle breathed, her eyes widening in horror. The figure emerging from the cloud of darkness was massive. It wasn't solid in the way a living creature would be. Its form shifted like shadows, like broken reflections in a warped mirror. It had the shape of a human, but the edges were fuzzy, smeared, as if it was made from the very darkness of Ravenshade itself. Elle took a step back, her breath caught in her throat. What is that? The heart's true form, Jinx muttered, his eyes wide with terror. It's not just a core. It's an entity. It's the soul of Ravenshade. It's alive, and it feeds off everything we've experienced. Every soul, every moment of pain. The figure shifted, and a terrible low growl filled the air, the sound vibrating through the room as if the building was responding to the creature's presence. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was something older, something ancient and terrifying. It was no longer confined to the altar. Its tendrils now stretched across the walls, slithering into every crack and crevice like a sentient disease. Maya stumbled back in fear. It's not over. It's alive. It's taking. From the heart, it's become the hospital itself. Victor's grip on his weapon tightened. We need to get the hell out of here now. But as they turned to flee, the creature surged forward, its tendrils grasping the air. The shadows enveloped them, and Elle felt herself pulled toward it. Pulled toward the heart, which was alive once again. The curse had merely shifted, changing forms and adapting to their attempts to stop it. We're not leaving, Elle shouted, pulling free from the grasp of the shadows as she sprinted toward the only exit. But the darkness was faster, the descent into madness. The hospital had turned against them. The walls closed in around them as the creature's tendrils reached toward them, and the shadows seemed to shift into solid figures, the lost souls of Ravenshade's past, twisted into horrific mockeries of the people they once were. They weren't just figments of the curse anymore. They were reality, pulled from the very fabric of the hospital. Elle heard a voice, no, voices echoing in her head, whispering her name, urging her toward the darkness. The walls around her seemed to bend, the very structure of the hospital, warping as if it were alive, a sentient being that no longer cared about their presence. It had consumed everything. Their attempts to escape were nothing but the whispers of prey. We're trapped, Jinx yelled, his voice breaking. He tried to hack into the system again, but the laptop's screen flickered, then went black. He slammed it down in frustration. The heart's blocking everything. It's gone beyond the technology, beyond the building itself. The figure loomed closer, now more defined in its twisted, shadowy form. Eyes glowing white emerged from the dark shapes around them, eyes that burned with hunger. The creature was no longer just a part of the hospital. It was the hospital, Elle. Gripped her head, the voices growing louder in her mind. We have to sever the connection again, but we can't do it here. It's too powerful. Ryan was at her side, his eyes wide with realization. What are you saying? The heart, it's become one with Ravenshade. We need to get to the heart of the hospital, the true center of it all. If we can disconnect it from the rest of the hospital's network, we might have a chance. Victor's gaze hardened. Where's the center? Elle's eyes focused on the shifting, writhing form of the creature. It's in the heart of the building, the old operating rooms, the real core of Ravenshade. That's where we'll find the source of everything, the final push, The darkness was closing in. The shadows were alive, reaching out like arms, pulling them into the depths. Ella felt herself slipping, the weight of the creature's presence, suffocating her. But there was no other option. There was no way out except through. "We have no choice," Elle said, her voice filled with determination. "We have to fight to the center. If we don't sever its link, we'll all become part of it. We'll be lost forever." Jinx nodded, his face grim. "Let's move. Now." They sprinted through the crumbling halls of Ravenshade, the creature pursuing them. The walls seemed to pulse, and the floors shifted beneath their feet as the hospital's curse grew stronger. The very building seemed to be coming alive, its twisted, broken heart pushing its will outward. As they make their way deeper into the heart of Ravenshade, they are forced to confront the full extent of the curse and its true purpose. The hospital has become alive, a sentient being whose very core has become one with the souls it's trapped. The true test of survival begins now. In Act 3, they will face their greatest fears as they uncover the terrible secrets buried deep within the heart of the hospital and realize the curse is far from over. The descent into Ravenshade's core. The hospital had shifted, warped. The walls were no longer the clean, sterile white they once were. Now they were stained with the marks of the curse. The floorboards creaked underfoot like old bones, and the air was thick, suffocating. Each breath seemed to draw them deeper into the black hole that Ravenshade had become. They ran through the darkened halls, the oppressive weight of the place pressing down on them. The shadows were alive now, growing more sentient with every passing moment. They reached out with dark tendrils, brushing against their skin like fingers made of ice. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole, and the faint whisper of lost souls echoed through the corridors. Ella's heart raced as they reached the central stairwell, the one that would lead them to the heart of Ravenshade, the very core of the place. There was no turning back now. If they didn't destroy the heart and sever the link between the curse and the hospital, they would never escape. They would become part of the hospital's twisted network forever. "Keep moving," Ella ordered, her voice firm despite the rising terror in her chest. Jinx fumbled with his laptop, his fingers trembling. "I can't access anything anymore. The heart, it's blocking everything. It's too far gone." Ryan pulled out a flashlight, pointing it down the stairwell. The narrow, winding steps seemed to drop into oblivion, disappearing into the shadows below. "I don't like this," Ryan said, his voice edged with fear. "I don't know what we're walking into." "We don't have a choice," Elle replied. "It's the only way to stop it." Victor, still gripping his weapon tightly, nodded grimly. "Lead the way." The threshold of the forgotten rooms. They descended deeper into the hospital's heart. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. The flickering of their flashlights cast long shadows across the walls, distorting the space around them. The further they went, the more distorted the building became. The layout no longer made sense. Doors that should have led to hallways opened into impossible spaces, rooms filled with whispers and corridors that twisted at odd angles. Then they came to a door at the end of the hall, one that was unlike any they had seen before. It was made of heavy, weathered wood, its surface scratched and scarred, as though it had been there for centuries. The air around it was thick with an almost tangible energy, like the door was alive, holding something terrible behind it. "This is it," Elle said quietly, staring at the door, a shiver running down her spine. The heart of Ravenshade, the source of everything. The door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a vast room beyond. It was unlike any part of the hospital they had seen before. The walls were lined with strange markings, and the room was filled with old machines, their designs archaic, almost ritualistic in nature. The ceiling was impossibly high, and in the center of the room, beneath a pool of dim, flickering light, sat the heart. It was no longer a small, beatable object. It had grown, expanded, and was now a monstrous thing. Tangled with wires, tubes, and roots, its pulsating red core now surrounded by a vast network of veins that seemed to spread out from it, weaving through the walls like an infection. The heart seemed to throb with a dark energy, sending ripples of power through the entire room. Elle's breath caught in her throat. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the floor beneath her feet felt like it was alive. Jinx's voice trembled as he spoke. This isn't just a heart. It's the nexus. The source. It's tied to everything. The hospital, the patients, the memories. Maya shook her head, a look of pure horror on her face. We have to destroy it. We have to sever the connection. Victor clenched his fists. I don't think we can destroy it just by killing it, not anymore. It's not just an organ anymore, it's a system, a network. It's become the hospital. Ella's mind raced as she processed the full weight of what they were facing. This wasn't just a curse. It was an intelligent, malevolent entity that had evolved. Ravenshade itself had been constructed around it, feeding into it, sustaining. And this was its true form, its final evolution. If we sever the connection between it and the hospital, Ella said slowly, thinking aloud, it will collapse. The curse will break. Everything tied to it will die. The souls trapped here, they'll be freed. Ryan stepped forward, looking grim. How do we do that? Ella's eyes flickered toward the machine-like structures surrounding the heart, their roots and veins weaving through the walls. She could feel the heartbeat of the place, the pulsing energy, reverberating through her very bones. The connections are all through these machines, she said, gesturing to the wires and tubes that were feeding into the heart. If we cut them, we sever the link. The heart will no longer be connected to the hospital, but we're going to have to destroy everything. Maya looked at her in disbelief. Destroy everything. Everything. Yes, if we don't, we'll never escape, and neither will the souls trapped here. The final choices. Elle and the others approached the heart. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. The very air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on them, suffocating them. Shadows moved in the corners of the room, not as figments of the curse, but as manifestations of it. Twisted souls, their distorted faces screaming, their bodies writhing in agony. Elle turned to her team, her voice shaking. If we do this, there's no going back. The hospital won't just disappear, it'll collapse. Everything tied to it will break, and we may not make it out. Ryan stepped forward, his face filled with determination. We don't have a choice. If we don't stop it, we're all going to become part of it. We'll be stuck here forever, just like the others. Elle nodded. Then we end it. With a single motion, Elle reached for a set of scalpel-like tools that Jinx had found earlier, tools she knew were part of the hospital's original design. She began to sever the veins and wires that connected the heart to the rest of the hospital's infrastructure. Each cut sent a shockwave of energy through the air, and with each severed connection, the pulsating heart seemed to weaken, its power ebbing away. But as she worked, the ground shuddered, and the shadows began to react. The air grew thick with a screaming sound, an angry wail that echoed throughout the room. It wasn't just the heart that was alive, it was everything tied to it. The hospital itself was fighting back. The collapse of Ravenshade is. Elle made the final cut. The room exploded with energy. The heart throbbed once more, but now it was fading, its power dissipating as the veins and wires were destroyed. The building trembled violently, as though it was dying. The walls cracked, and the entire foundation seemed to groan under the strain. Ella's body was slammed to the floor as the air became electric, the power of the collapsing hospital threatening to crush them. The shadows surged forward, now feral, more aggressive, twisting into horrific shapes as the walls around them began to break apart. We have to get out, now! Victor screamed, pulling Elle to her feet. But the floor was collapsing, the walls cracking, and the heart itself was fading into nothingness, its pulse growing weaker with each passing second. But the escape was not simple. The building was falling apart, and they had only moments to make their exit. Run! Elle shouted, as the very foundation of Ravenshade collapsed beneath their feet, the darkness chasing them down. The hospital is breaking down, but will they make it out alive? What will be left of Ravenshade when it all falls apart? The true fight for survival is far from over. The hospital's final breath. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning wood and metal. Ravenshade, the monstrous entity that had once been a hospital, was now unraveling. The screams of the walls and floors echoed through the ruins, the ancient hospital's heartbeat slowly dying, leaving behind a hollow, desolate space that was more a memory than reality. Ella, Ryan, Jinx, Maya, and Victor scrambled through the chaotic ruins of the hospital, their hearts pounding with the desperate urge to escape. The walls creaked and groaned as if the building itself were in its final throes of agony, fighting desperately to keep its life intact. "We're almost there," Ella shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the collapsing structure. She led the group down the crumbling hallways, her flashlight illuminating the twisted, warped remains of the place. The doors around them were splintering, the windows shattering one by one as the hospital buckled under its own weight. There was no time to look back. Behind them, the shadowy remnants of the curse surged forward, reaching for them with dark, twisted limbs, their cold fingers grazing their skin. The souls of the lost, those trapped in Ravenshade for decades, were now free but vengeful, the curse's last defiant act before it was destroyed. The spirits shrieked in torment, their faces twisted in eternal agony, and though they were no longer part of the hospital, they seemed to linger in its wake, vengeful and angry. "Faster!" Victor shouted, his voice tight with panic. Ryan turned, his eyes wide with terror. "We're not going to make it. This place is collapsing around us." "Keep going," Elle cried out, gripping Ryan's arm. "It's just ahead. The exit is just through that hallway." The hospital trembled again, shaking with such force that the ceiling cracked above them, dropping debris to the floor. The once clear hallways were now filled with dust and smoke, their escape route narrowing with every step. The door to salvation. They reached the emergency exit at the far end of the hallway. The large iron door groaned as Elle pulled it open with all her strength, but it resisted. The building was fighting back, the curse refusing to let go. "Come on!" Maya screamed, pushing against the door. Her hands were bleeding from the pressure, her face pale with exhaustion. "We have to push together," Jinx shouted. "We can't give up now." With one final unified effort, they forced the door open, and the weight of the hospital's final breath rushed in. The outside air was a jarring contrast, fresh, cold, and alive, but even that seemed to be filled with a sense of unease. They could hear the roar of the collapse from behind them, the final scream of Ravenshade as it faded into oblivion, but there was no time to look back. The final escape as they stumbled outside, the ground beneath them seemed to shake violently. The very earth trembled in the wake of Ravenshade's death. The sky above was heavy, dark clouds swirling ominously as if the curse had reached beyond the hospital's walls, threatening the entire world. Elle gasped for air, her lungs burning. They had escaped, but at what cost? The hospital, the curse, the heart. It was all gone, but in its wake, there was only an overwhelming emptiness, like the world had just ripped apart at its seams. Victor stumbled toward her, his expression hard. "We made it out. But the world isn't the same. Nothing will be the same." Elle nodded, her voice hoarse. "No, nothing will." Jinx shook his head in disbelief. Did we actually stop it? Or is this just another phase of the curse?" Ryan's face was grim. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. We've broken the heart. Ravenshade is dead." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The weight of the past few hours, the rituals, the deaths, the sacrifice, hung heavily in the air. But as they stood there, staring out into the night, the very ground beneath their feet seemed to shift again, and the wind whispered through. The trees like a mournful wail. The finality of Ravenshade's end felt almost too easy, too quiet. It was as though the curse had simply transitioned, leaving behind only a lingering shadow. A new world. It was Elle who finally broke the silence. "We're not safe, not yet." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. Ella's eyes were hard, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The curse wasn't just confined to Ravenshade. It was something bigger, something ancient, and now it's out there. Free. Jinx turned toward her, confusion in his eyes. Wait, you mean the curse is still alive? Ella nodded grimly. It's free now, like a living organism. Ravenshade was just one node, a conduit. It used to be contained, but now it's out in the world, spreading. Victor's face darkened. So it's not over. No, Ella replied, shaking her head slowly. The true battle has just begun. The curse is evolving, and we're not done yet. We may have destroyed Ravenshade, but we're not free. The final revelation. As the group stood at the edge of the destroyed Ravenshade, something more ominous lingered in the air. A soft whisper, almost imperceptible, rose around them. It was faint at first, like the sound of wind passing through the trees, but it quickly grew louder, more distinct, more urgent. Elle spun around, her eyes narrowing. Did you hear that? Jinx's face paled. What the hell is that? Ryan froze, his eyes scanning the empty space. It's not over. We haven't stopped it. It's still coming. Suddenly the ground trembled beneath their feet again. But this time it wasn't just the building collapsing. It was the earth itself, as though the very fabric of reality was being twisted. The trees around them seemed to breathe, and a distant figure, shadowed, appeared on the horizon. The final wave of darkness, the curse, alive and well, had evolved beyond their control. The hospital's destruction was only the beginning of the true apocalypse. The screen fades to black as the sound of whispers, too numerous to count, echo through the air. The curse is no longer confined to Ravenshade, and the shadows that once lived within its walls are now free to spread, to feed, to grow. The question now isn't about survival. It's about how to stop an unstoppable force, a darkness that has already taken root in the world beyond. As the last echoes of the curse fade, a new chapter begins, one filled with uncertainty, terror, and the realization that Ravenshade's death was only the beginning.